All right, so 10 a.m. Monday, April 20th, and really the headlines is just how dry it has been, even with the rainfall that we did have yesterday in parts of the state. So increased fire danger statements across much of the Commonwealth today due to the combination of low relative humidity, gusty winds, and just generally dry conditions for a lot of our fuel moisture. Again, that fuel is just anything that can burn sticks, twigs, larger branches, that kind of thing. And freeze warnings also in effect for most of the state for late tonight, early tomorrow morning, with a number of frost advisories from, I would say, central Virginia along the I-95 corridor and areas east. But the top headline for today is just, how dry it is and our fire weather conditions. So looking at the bigger picture here, we do actually have a pretty weak cold front that's going to be dropping through the area. Weak in the sense of not bringing us any moisture. There's a chance for a really stray sprinkle, especially in northern Virginia, but it's a very low chance and it's not looking to bring measurable rainfall at all. What it will do is bring us a shot of cold air and bring increased northwesterly winds behind it. So that's where we're going to get our strong gusty winds today and also where we're going to get that dry air from. Tuesday, really throughout the end of the week, is going to turn seasonable and eventually start to warm up back to about where we should be for this time of the year. And just at a quick glance, it kind of looks like there's a few rain chances, but really the chances are so limited. So we are going to continue our very dry pattern that we have been seeing here in the Commonwealth. So before we get to how much rain we're expecting and all of that, this is a look back at the past 24 hours. So, my house in the suburbs of Richmond kind of felt like it was a wet, rainy day, but in the grand scheme of things, at least here, we just really didn't pick up much in the metro Richmond area. Now, there was some slightly heavier rainfall in Northern Virginia, as you see there, closer to that 10, or excuse me, a tenth of an inch up to a quarter of an inch. So the fire weather increased fire danger statements are not in effect for portions in Northern Virginia just because of the increased rainfall that they had yesterday. And then western parts of the Commonwealth saw little to nothing at all. So unfortunately, the rainfall did not help our drought situation, nor did it help the fire weather conditions. So as you can see here, with the exception of far southwest Virginia and portions of Northern Virginia, the entire state is under that increased fire danger. We have relative humidity values as low as 20 to about 30% statewide. And gusty winds are eventually going to turn to the northwest when that cold front does move through the area. But we'll be seeing winds gusting up to 20 to 25 miles per hour, and some locations might get as high as 30 miles an hour. And the timing of it is 11 o'clock this morning, so just a few hours from now, when that cold front moves through and we really start to see those relative humidities drop through the early evening hours. And it's, again, for most of the state. So a fire that is ignited due to anything, matches, cigarettes, machinery, is going to spread pretty quickly just due to the dry and windy conditions. So this is just a more hour by hour snapshot. I'm not going to go through this, but if you're looking for a more granular look at a particular location, you can look through the period 11 a.m. to about 7 p.m. is that time frame that we're looking at. And you can look at those winds and compare them to how low the humidities are. Now moving on to the cold, because that cold front is going to drop the temperatures pretty rapidly overnight. Now, this is from roughly 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. So the right before sunrise, you can see most of the state under that dark purple. That's the freeze warning. So 28 degrees or cooler, that's a hard freeze. And that's when we start to see sensitive vegetation going to be killed off if it is not covered up. Lightweight blankets, some sort of insulating heat for crops, going to be really necessary for the sensitive vegetation. And then frost advisories generally from central Virginia along I-95 and areas east. And you'll notice that our immediate coastline, just due to the effects of the water, not in the frost advisory, but definitely something to keep in mind for I-95. Here's a closer look at what we can expect overnight through the early morning hours. So this is not a statewide, everyone is getting a frost or a freeze, but you definitely see some much colder pockets of air, cooler than normal for sure. So that is why we are seeing these headlines. And especially if you're under those freeze warnings, make sure that you are reminding folks about pets too, because I think the outdoor pets, we kind of almost forget about them in April, thinking, oh, it's not going to get that cold in April, but definitely is going to be pretty chilly early tomorrow morning. And continuing on for a look at what we can expect for precipitation, not much, at least through the first part of our week. All the way through Thursday, you can see that we have maybe a tenth of an inch in Northern Virginia, but that is the extent of it. The rest of it, a sprinkle at best, all the way through Thursday. And then when we look at sort of that second half of the week into early next week, maybe a quarter of an inch. So there is the chance for some additional showers over the weekend, but also not going to do too much to really help our drought situation, which is worsening. And this is just that 7-day total. So it's taking the two graphics from the previous to give us a sense of the whole 7-day total. And I apologize for that graphic being cut off on the left there. But you notice that statewide, we're anywhere from about a quarter of an inch up to maybe a little over a half an inch in Northern Virginia for the whole week ahead. So we desperately need it. Now, I will say I did not include any drought information in this briefing, but that's not because the rain that we saw yesterday helped the drought in any sense. It's just that the U.S. Drought Monitor and all the drought products come out usually on Thursdays or later in the week. So I could have recycled the old information that you guys saw last Thursday, but I didn't want to confuse anyone thinking that it was new information. So we do still have all of the drought conditions, very dry. We desperately need a good soaking rain, but you will get updated drought information and the latest status on Thursday in that briefing. Soil moisture is also something that comes up typically when we see some heavy rainfall, just to see a sense of when, how the soil is looking. But I will say when we do have our first heavy rainfall, our soil is obviously just as dry as everything else is. So we won't have too many concerns about that. But if the soil is overly dry, sometimes it is a little bit difficult to actually soak into the soil. So that's something that we will have to keep an eye on. Temperature trend, once we get past today and the cold morning tomorrow, we're actually on an upswing. So today is definitely a cool day with highs in the 50s and 60s. And then despite waking up in the 20s and low 30s tomorrow morning, we're actually going to be in the upper 60s. That's a little cooler than normal, and then jump right up Wednesday through the end of the week. So just kind of a small little hiccup in the grand scheme of things. But that is the extent of it. Again, I'm not going to go through this day by day, but this is your highs, lows, probability of precipitation. One thing I'll draw your eyes to, the last column there, you'll notice we do have some rain chances for Saturday and Sunday. So hopefully we can get some measurable rainfall there, but it's just a little too early in the big picture to tell how much. But thanks, everyone. Please reach out if you have any questions. Otherwise, we will have another email briefing, not a live, just an email on Thursday. But thanks, everyone, and have a great week.